Good afternoon, everyone. Record-shattering cold and snow engulf the central and eastern U.S. as crops are emerging in some of the more southerly regions. But in Indiana, the record-breaking snow is termed just a few inches, visible from the air. GFS models showing another Arctic front coming down first week of May, 30-degree Fahrenheit below normal temperatures to engulf parts of grow zones and the United States once again. India is struggling as cold temperatures and snow wreak havoc across the orchard areas of the lower Himalaya and Himachal Pradesh. California farm water cut the supply. 25% of all agriculture in California affected. Shipping container mysteries, as so many shipping containers have disappeared off of our planet that now companies in droves are ordering more. This is one of the largest orders, 150,000 20-foot containers. Bottlenecks in shipping can't explain the disappearance of containers. Has to be something else going on. Where the rubber meets the road, Fed BS, that's balance sheet. Crossing over the spiking all-time high lumber prices, spiking iron ore futures, food, commodity, shipping. Hyperinflation inbound, forcing you through the cattle gates of the corporate arms that will welcome you at the end. Research into the 5G network architecture reveals your mobile phone service could be maliciously used against you. New findings show 5G could use an exploit in your data and cause security flaws through cellular networks. As with any disruptive technology, bad actors and corporations will always look for ways to exploit lax security at the cost of you and your privacy. That's why I use Virtual Shield VPN so corporations can't trace you or I across the web. You can head over to virtualshield.com and in the download tab, I'm going to choose Firefox. And click Install Now to add the Virtual Shield add-on. It's just that easy. And get started with your free 30-day trial. Install it, click Connect. You'll see the shield turn from red to green. And you'll see how from my initial service provider, I was able to even change my IP. Virtual Shield Network protected. Get Virtual Shield for 50% off today by going to virtualshield.com/adapt2030 or click on the link in the description box below. And now on with the video. Starting you right off here, California farm water supply cuts. Now, for those of you in the U.S., this is a significant story. I can't believe this did not get more traction. Okay, the drought hitting the news. Obviously, they have the agenda to fulfill with that kind of news feed. But what they're not talking about is the loss and the reduction of fresh foods across all supermarkets in the U.S. Asparagus, melons, lettuce, rice, tomatoes, sweet corn, and others is another list of 60. Spinach, turnips, etc. California is the largest vegetable producer in the United States, hands down. And looking at the numbers of the 2 million acres that are irrigated, but 1 out of every 4 of those acres has had its water supply cut by 95%, meaning California agriculture just got slashed 25%. So the reason that your lettuce looks scrappy and it costs way more is because of this. And the amount of Southern California agriculture restrictions and pullbacks, this is nothing more than a purposeful plan to drive your food prices up or completely control and restrict and reduce the amount of available foods. So I would highly suggest looking at your local farm market co-op during the season right now. Learn how to store those foods and dehydrate and get ready for these supply shortages of veggies across the U.S. because it started in earnest right now. Summer's going to be a great time to know your local farmer. Now, speaking of agriculture struggling, unseasonable, record-shattering cold, the stretch all the way from Canada way down into Mexico, which also saw hundreds of cold records shattered and broken on the 100-year level. But weather forecasters up in Indiana really trying to downplay this record snow and cold. Snow a few inches deep over Indianapolis. I look at this and say a few inches deep. Maybe you live in the Arctic tundra because my scale of a few inches deep is not this. If we're going to use generalities, I'll say a whole bunch of inches deep. Looking further afield at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Indy 500, a few inches to blanket that entire area that deep. Okay, I think it's more than a few inches myself. The downplaying Picture's worth 1,000 words. Record-shattering cold. Anywhere you see a blue or green dot, smashing records. And this went on for 3 straight days, and that moved more eastward every single day. Century marks smashed there as well. But when we're looking at agriculture, Texas Panhandle and places like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, crops were already emerging out of there. These are warmer areas, especially central Texas, mid to southern Mississippi. 111-year cold records, not good for the emerging grasses, especially the blooms that have come out across so many of the fruit orchards already. And flirting with records or breaking all-time cold records here. Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida. This is how far south that cold had pushed itself, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, places like St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City, I could expect that in the 30s below freezing range still. But the record cold, low 31, breaks that 1936 record. But for the cold to push so far south, it's definitely going to have some effect on agriculture. And a quick FYI, farmers can replant. But this year there's a seed shortage. So they might have already put the seed in the ground in some more southerly locations. If it is damaged or lost, they could replant. There's still plenty of time. But for them to get the seed, that is a whole other set of circumstances not a lot of mainstream media want to talk about. It should be a major news story why we don't have seed this year across the U.S. for farms to plant. But looking further off the GFS model, you see the southern United States, Maritimes of Canada, all the way down into Mexico there, that huge purple blob swimming through the continent. Behind it, up there in Alaska and central Canada, that is another Arctic blast, 30 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures. That shall arrive the first week of May. Damaging crops in the same exact areas. And heading up to Himachal Pradesh, orchards were flowering and leafed out at this point. Record-breaking cold and snow. They term it in the Indian media as wreaking havoc on fruits and vegetable crops. And what we've seen happen in Europe as well with the wipeout of the French vineyard season as well as loss of vines due to the cold. Southern Hemisphere also experiencing crop damage, cold in Australia. Now, crop damage is one thing, but damage to your fiat currency in terms of overzealous money printing taking us into a hyperinflation event, devaluing your dollar right in front of you. We'll start off here with the Federal Reserve total assets held by the top 1% of the world's wealthy people. That's the blue. Wow, look at that massive spike in 2020 to 2021. Those are only the essential businesses, though. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And where the rubber meets the road, Fed BS. Absolutely. Oh, that's the Fed balance sheet. Sorry. Crossing over the lumber prices spiking to all-time highs. Never seen before this crossover of commodities in lumber and the Fed BS. Something significant has happened in this chart. It's been noted that this is a crossover point that has never been experienced, and it's a very significant one to look at in terms of how devalued the fiat's becoming, with the inverse now plainly seen in the commodities. It's in play now. To put it into a different perspective here, the global money and financial stimulus from February 2020 to March 2021. This is 1 year of injected money printing into the world system. 12.3 trillion in the US, and then it scales down. 6.8 trillion in the Eurozone, 3.8 trillion in Japan, 1.3 trillion in the UK. Now the trillion, that's a big number. So remember, 1,000 billions is a trillion. So that'd be 1,300 billions is that small amount there for the UK. And then China rocking in there with 2.6 billion. Across the globe, $26.8 trillion was created out of thin air this year. Do you think your fiat, whatever country you're in, is worth as much this year with 26.8 trillion of extra of those units out there to dilute everything else? Because when you look at this spiking everything, is it because those prices are really up and there's that much demand, or is it because of the delusion of the money with this much extra money printing? It's worth less, so things are going to cost more. It's an inverse. Iron ore futures spiking. A lot of people need iron for rebar in their houses, driveways. Industry needs it, so everything's going to cost more your house to build it. Looking at the all-time high lumber prices, if you were escaping the city and going to build a house, your house now costs 3x more than it would have just a year ago based on the commodities going into that house. But another one that is showing whopping trade deficits, likely taking us into this very first stage of hyperinflation like they saw in Weimar Republic. It wasn't just from zero to hyperinflation. There were several years prior to that where prices would double, they would double, and then it was a 14x. And people were spooked, and then it pulled back down to like a 3x increase, and then that fourth and fifth year it went up into the hyperinflation. This very much shows that we're at least in the first or second year of that same repeating event. Seasonally adjusted. That green line should scare you. That's the inbound container traffic coming in versus what's going out. The trade deficits, the United States is really exporting nothing except food, and we're importing everything else if you're from the U.S. We need to devalue more dollars to pay for this. At some point, the world's going to say enough of the dollars. And another thing happening right now is this mysterious disappearance of millions of shipping containers. The stories to come out to try to explain it are like, yeah, China's hoovering up everything, and when an inbound shipment goes to China, if they're not then going to export the same amount of containers out, then they just keep the extras and put them in some giant lot somewhere. It's got to be visible from space by now if it's that big, if you follow the narrative. But Hapag-Lloyd, this is the largest order that's been seen so far, 150,000 new 20-foot containers, $500 million order. Again, you got to use iron for this, and different metals in shortage, rocketing prices. But what's happening with the containers across the planet? I understand the bottlenecks of shipping, a Suez thing. Okay, maybe you could add another 2 weeks for a turnaround on that after it gets on the rails, empties out, and then gets plugged back into the port system. But this is very different. These are containers disappearing off the face of the earth. Where do they go? Okay, this is Hapag-Lloyd, but there's been dozens and dozens of other companies ordering very large amounts of containers as well. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. We're talking about millions of new containers being ordered. So what's happening with the old ones? Where are they? You can't tell me that many people are building container houses. There's something very strange happening in the shipping and logistics system. Are they being used now to pack and then store something in a different location that we're unaware of? So they're just being completely stocked, used, full, and then they end up in a storage facility either underground or in whatever bug-out locations that governments are getting ready for, and that's the reason that the containers have disappeared. Those wouldn't be put back in the system. They'd be a one-time storage thing, like a storage bucket for long-term storable foods. You pack it and you leave it for years. But we're talking about millions of containers disappearing right now. Is it really at that inflection point where now, in earnest, the boxed goods are being stored away and that's why the containers are getting thin on the planet? If it is, that's another sign something's gone really wrong really fast. Like governments are now in earnest in the preparation phase for the next stage of whatever happens. I'm saying magnetic field anomalies in the outer solar system, coupled with the decreasing magnetic field on the sun inbound 2024 with massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and complete breaking of the infrastructure system referenced in John Casey's book Upheaval, all by October of 2024. This kind of fits right in that same timeline. If all the containers are disappearing, somebody's packing those and storing them right now. They're offline. Hence, all the new ordering. And speaking of long-term storable foods and putting it away for an emergency, My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, the 2-week or the 4-week emergency food supply. They also have 1 month, 6 month, and 1 year packs. And if you already have bulk foods, they have the Mylar bags and the oxygen packs, so you can pack that yourself in smaller pound bags, keep it for a longer period of time. That link for My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030 is in the description box below this video, along with all of the images and stories of tonight's report. And every time you purchase something from My Patriot Supply, it helps support this channel, so I can bring you more research like this to keep you and your family's grand solar minimum prepared. I do thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of the video, and I'll see you next time.